So yesterday I had the honor of interviewing drummer Antonio Sánchez. Now, I became aware of Antonio's drumming when I saw him play with the Pat Metheny group back in about 2002. And he's been playing with Pat from the Metheny group through all these different iterations of his bands. Then I heard him on the Birdman soundtrack where he provided the drums, the score to it, which is really an incredible movie and a great soundtrack. Here is my interview with Antonio. Hey everybody, I'm here with my new friend Antonio Sánchez, who's one of the greatest drummers in the world. He's going to do some drumming for you here. This is a big honor for me. I've been a huge fan of his for years, and Antonio, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate
a pleasure
that.
to be on your show. Man.
Yes.
An honor.
So, Antonio, really incredible to hear you play. I went and rewatched Birdman yesterday when I was flying down. I watched the movie when it came out. I love the movie. And I watched an interview of you talking about it. First that you did a pre-recording of it with the director where he was kind of giving you cues. And then you went back in and actually were playing to the original tracks then that you did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first thing we did is worked off of the script.
With no visuals.
With no visuals.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because they had just started shooting the film. So there was really nothing for us to look at. So then he would just explain the scenes to me in great detail. And as you know, the way it's shot is the long scenes.
Yes.
So I didn't really know the movie or anything. So I asked him to, after he would explain the scenes, to sit right in front of my drums so that he could picture the timing of the scene. And then I just asked him to raise his hand whenever he would see the next phase.
Was he imagining this thing?
Yeah. So he had his eyes closed. Yeah, of course. But, I assume that,
But he's of course,
you know, people that do that,
yes.
you know, they can do that.
He sees it in his mind.
Exactly. It's like a painter or a sculptor. You can see something, or a musician that can hear something, you know, and just do it. So we recorded the whole movie like that, and you know, it was really liberating because I wasn't really watching anything. It was just me imagining things together with Iñárritu, which was very unorthodox, of course. And then once they had a rough cut of the film, they grabbed those demos and then superimposed them on the places where he wanted them. And then once that was done, they brought me to LA. They showed me the rough cut with the music, and then we went into the studio the next day and redid the whole thing.
When you redid it, though, were you actually watching this, or were you actually... Okay, so you're watching.
Yeah.
The drums fit so perfectly. It blew me away when I first watched it, because I never imagined having a score like that, and it was just so effective. It was really incredible, so visionary.
Well, you know, I cannot claim credit for it because he was the one that really, really knew what he wanted, you know, and I was just kind of the vessel to make it happen. But one of the interesting things is that when we did the first batch of demos, you know, I brought my drums. They always sound really good in the studio. It was at Avatar Studios, which sounds great. And then when he had the rough cut, he said, you know, when we redo this, one of the things I want to change is the sound of the drums, because your drums sound too good for what the movie is, because it happens in the bowels of this old Broadway theater.
Yeah.
So I would like the drums to sound like they've been in storage for 50 years or so. So
and that's you at the beginning of the movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. The first thing you hear on the film is my voice in Spanish, asking him something in the studio. Alcancé a hacer eso, se oía. Like, I was trying to do that. Did you hear it? And, you know, when I went to see the movie for the first time in the movie theater and I saw that, I was like, what? You know, it was just incredible. You know, that's the level of improvisation that he would use as well.
I know, it was unbelievable. Yeah. When you're watching it, you're not even thinking about you, though, are you? Were you really thinking about the stuff when you're actually watching the movie? And were you thinking, "Oh, this is me," or were you kind of divorced from? What's that like?
You know, it's hard to explain because, of course, I've heard, you know, my drums in a million different things, but never in a movie theater in quadraphonic sound with those images. You know? So, you know, I remember I went with Tana, my wife, and we went to like a 2:00 show where nobody would be there. And the thing started, and you know, the credits in the beginning, they start with with that, you know, and I remember we just started like clutching each other's hand, like, you know, without really understanding what was going on, and it was just kind of an out of body experience in a way. It was super cool, amazing.
When I rewatched it, I watched it with headphones because I didn't. The first time I watched it on my TV, and I didn't watch it in the theater. I watched it at home. And then listening to it in headphones, it's a totally different experience to hear how the drums work. But some of the, you know, when Michael Keaton, when his character's walking down the hallways, and the scene is building, the intensity of the scene is building, and then you're building. It was amazing because it was. To me, it was so much more effective than music. I couldn't even imagine music being in its place.
Right. Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that a lot of people realized after the movie came out is how malleable the drums are, because they don't really give you a specific vibe in terms of like, oh, this is a sad scene, so you need the minor chords and the strings, and this is happy, so you know, it's just more neutral. You know, and it creates a vibe, a really heavy vibe, but not spoon feeds you exactly what you're supposed to be feeling at the moment. You know, so I think after that, a lot of people kind of realized like, oh, this is really cool. We never done this before. So then, like, they called me to do Get Shorty, which is, you know, a great series that is happening on Epix, that channel with Ray Romano and Chris O'Dowd. And, you know, it's just a blast to just, you know, play drums for most of the scenes, which is really, really cool.
Now, would you rather have had something to play to before you, when you first were doing it? Or was it actually better that they cut them into the scenes and then I guess you would have relearned some of the
Well, that's what I had to
ideas.
do. That's what I had to do, and because the first demos were mostly for him to see what he liked.
Yeah.
So then when we did the second batch of recording, he said, okay, this I really like, so I want more of that.
Really do that.
Yeah,
exactly
but then
like
I was
that.
looking at the film now.
Yeah.
So then I'm doing that and really trying to accentuate different things. And we were more specific with dialogue. Okay, when you hear this word, stop there. When you hear this word, stop it. Exactly.
Okay.
And then some things that he didn't really like, then we would just pull back on those. And then, so that's why the first batch of demos were so helpful, so that he could get a really good idea of where to take it from there.
I next asked Antonio to explain how he goes about creating grooves and his writing process in general. Do you typically just jam into Pro Tools and then say, oh, I like this section, and then we'll develop something out of an improvisation typically?
Depends on the project. Like, for example, I did a record, what was it, like 3 years ago now, called Bad Hombre.
Yep.
Which it all started basically from drum improvisation. So maybe I would set up a click or something and then just start experimenting with different kinds of grooves. And then I started editing those improvisations, and then I started writing to the improvisations, which was a completely different way for me to do to compose, because usually I sit on the piano or the keyboard and come up with a chord structure, bass line, groove, blah, 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 blah. A little more orthodox. But this thing that I just showed you, for example, is going to be featured on the Bad Hombre 2 record.
Okay.
But this is going to be completely different, because what I'm doing is asking some of my favorite singers to provide me with a tune, either a cappella or with the most minimalistic accompaniment. And then I grab the tune and I rework it my way, with drums being basically the second most important instrument after voice. So whenever I'm working on a new groove, like for example this one, I like it because it's like an 8-bar groove that has like a melody. Dun, dun, ba, boom, ba, bing, bing, ba, boom, ba, dum, ba, ba, dum, ba, bing, bing, boom, ba, dum. And that's it, 8 bars. And then start fooling around and playing around that. So, it's just, fun stuff for me to do that I can then use for something in the future, like, an album or just have it as a file that I can pull out from whenever I want to.
Okay, if you were to compare this, the writing process or groove writing process, versus you actually playing with other people and improvising, how does that differ for you when you're actually reacting to other people? Like, I want you to talk about the flow and what you think about or what you don't think about when you're playing.
Yeah, well, that's, as you know, the $1 million question, because when you're improvising and you're reacting in real time, a lot of times you have no time to think. So you have to use your instincts, your experience, your knowledge to try to make decisions in that very moment, which is, the hardest thing about playing music and about playing jazz especially. So whenever I'm improvising by myself, I'm always looking to build phrases, to build motifs, to build melodies within the drums, and to expand on those little by little. But when I'm playing with people, usually, my first job is to listen to what they're doing and see how I can help the situation. Because as a drummer, you're like the beautiful Persian carpet where everybody's gonna stand, and but what I like doing is when everybody starts feeling comfortable on the carpet, all of a sudden, boom, I'll go like this a little bit, just to move things around. And that makes people change what they're playing. They make people react. And, that's one of the coolest things for me, to really have that kind of interplaying and interaction with the people around me.
So if I were to say to you, Antonio, improvise something right now that where do you start? If you were just to improvise right now, you have nothing in your head right now, but you start thinking, what's the first thing that you would start thinking if you have no one to react to, and you were just solo right now?
Yeah, I usually talk a lot about that on clinics because my theory is that you can start anywhere, literally anywhere. And I call this the random line concept, which basically, I grabbed that name from a game I used to play with my mom when I was a kid, where you have a piece of paper and 2 players and a pencil. And the first player draws a random line, literally, without thinking at all what that's going to be. And then you give it to the next player, and the next player looks at it and see, okay, what could this become? This is completely abstract. The person was not thinking of anything. And then all of a sudden you go like this and like that, and all of a sudden it's a car or a house. So from nothing came something. So a lot of times I like to really do that, just to throw the most random line on the drums and then stop and think and see, okay, what could this line become? And to me, that's one of the most fun parts about improvising. And I love to be in a room packed of people and have absolutely no preconception of what I'm gonna do. And the music starts kind of revealing itself in front of me whenever I do that. If I start losing my patience and I start getting ahead of myself, then that changes everything. But to me, one of the key things about this state of mind or frame of mind is patience. You have to have patience and leave space. If you are able to remember what you just played, then you can keep the flow. It's like, speaking. We're talking about this, and I make pauses. You ask me a question, I think about it, and I answer. If I was just too nervous and too eager, then I would get ahead of myself, and probably I wouldn't make that much sense. But with this technique, whenever I feel a little nervous or I feel like I don't know what could happen, this is usually the best thing that I can do. Okay, relax, chill, play something, leave a little space, think what it can become, play it again, repeat it, and then you start all of a sudden being in the groove, for lack of a better word, of what you're doing, and all of a sudden ideas start revealing themselves to me.
And next I asked Antonio if he could demonstrate how he goes from playing in time, let's say in an up-tempo swing tune, into a solo.
Let's say I'm playing a blues, 12 bars. One thing that I like to usually demonstrate is if I think in a non-musical way for my first 12 bars of solo, and then the second 12 bars of solo, then I try to develop 1 or 2 ideas, and that's it. So what I'm gonna do is the first 12 bars, I'm gonna just play time.
Okay.
Try to count with me, and the second 12 bars, I'm gonna play. Just let my hands do the talking. I'm not gonna really think too much. I'm just gonna play by reflex. Musicians that have played for a long time, it's very easy to play by reflex. You can play all day. And then the last 12 bars, I'm gonna actually think, which is incredibly hard sometimes while you're playing because there's no time.
Yeah.
So that's why your instincts and your experience is so handy, obviously, when it comes to these situations. So here we go. Oh yeah, thanks. Here we go. So believe it or not, it's a lot harder for me to do the last 12 bars, because the first 12 bars where I soloed, I really wasn't thinking anything in particular except for subdivisions. Where's my pulse? Am I going to play triplets? Am I going to play 8 notes? Am I going to play 16 notes? And, I've been practicing all that stuff my whole life. But the last 12 bars, I actually had to stop, think, and then remember everything that I'm playing so that I can keep talking about the same subject. So, again, remembering what you played is incredibly important. So I usually encourage people to try to play simple in the beginning, especially because if your first idea is like blah, 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 okay, if you can remember that, great. But most of the time, if you get ahead of yourself, then you're not going to remember it. So you can always get more complex as the idea goes by. So it's a lot better, I think, technically and mentally to start simple and then build up from there.
Let me ask you about music today and the use of electronic drums and things like that, and what your feeling is about that versus, human beings playing. What do you think? Do you ever listen to the radio and listen to things that are, popular music, and what do you think about this stuff?
I think, as we all know, we're going through a really interesting time in terms of how music is produced, how it's composed, how it's consumed. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's an ongoing process where we still don't know how it's going to end. We're definitely on the way somewhere, but it hasn't really been defined. And unfortunately for us musicians, the way we're getting compensated is very in a very meek way, because people tend to think that music is free. Yeah. Because a lot of these services make it free. Yeah. But it costs us to make music, obviously. So, for example, if a record company gives me, I don't know, $10,000 to make a recording, and the moment it comes out, it's also on Spotify and on Apple Music. Okay, what's the incentive to buy it, right? If you can listen to it on... Exactly. Yeah. There is no incentive. So how do you recoup those 10,000 so that the company makes a little bit of money just for you to make the next album?
Next record, yeah.
That's all a lot of us are asking. We know we're not going to become millionaires making jazz records. At least I know I'm not. But I want to be able to keep the flow of the albums and make enough money so that the record company doesn't drop me, so that they have an incentive to produce another record.
Why is jazz a vital and important form of music for people to listen to?
Because I feel like it's one of the most honest kinds of music, because if you can play, you can play, and if you can't play, you cannot really participate in this kind of dialogue. Yeah. So mediocrity is usually eliminated quickly. Of course, there's mediocre people on any kind of music or any aspect of life, of course. But jazz kind of has its built-in filter in that way, where you really need to be well prepared in order to be able to compete in the business or to be able to perform. It's like like a rocket scientist. Obviously, if you're a rocket scientist, you already have so much knowledge that you are on a higher level in terms of a specific field of knowledge. And jazz musicians, I feel like they're the ones that have the most research in their instruments. And I feel like, that kind of communication on stage, which is like you and I are talking right now, the back and forth, the interaction, and the conversation, that's what jazz is. And a lot of other kinds of music, everybody has their role, and the singer is there and everybody plays and it sounds great and everything is fine. But when you're playing jazz, whatever one person does affects everybody else, and whatever you do affects everybody else back. So that kind of exchange of energy to me is just fascinating.
If I had to say to you, give me 3 of your top jazz drumming records that really were influential to you, that the drummers were influential. What would be 3 records?
Well, one would have to be My Funny Valentine 4 and More by Miles Davis, the live record in Town Hall with Tony Williams playing drums. And he was 17, I believe. Yeah, this is insane. And another one, which, it was one of my first records where I started getting into jazz, which was really a fusion record. But it was Chick Corea Electric Band with Dave Weckl on it. And the album was Light Years.
Yep.
I remember I was in school in Mexico and somebody gave me a cassette tape. They're like, oh, you should check this out. You might like it. And I played it and it just kind of blew me away because it had, I was into rock and roll. So it had a lot of the elements from rock that I liked, like a big drum sound and electric instruments, but everybody was improvising like crazy and improvising at a very high level. And of course, Chick Corea is one of the pioneers of that kind of instrumentation, that kind of orchestration and composition. And another one, let me think. Now He Sings, Now He Subs by Chick Corea. Also Chick Corea, but Roy Haynes is the drummer. Yeah. And Roy Haynes, has been one of my heroes for a long time. He has such an incredible footprint, when he plays. It's just and he had the guts to play whole gigs with a flat right cymbal only and a crash, which for those who don't know, a flat right cymbal has no bell, so you only get that kind of sound. But he would get so many sounds out of that thing, and then that became his thing. So he's just a master, and the fact that he's still around and playing at I think it's 93, 94.
Yeah.
And I also have to say, it's just there's so many albums, anything with Elvin Jones, anything with Philly Joe Jones, Papa Joe Jones, Max Roach, Jack DeJohnette. There's just so many.
Cool. Is there anything that you have projects coming up that you want to talk about that you're involved in that are getting ready to come out?
Yeah, so like I was saying, this new edition of Bad Hombre is going to come out. And the cool thing about those projects is that I do everything here. I'm like a mad scientist in this little lab. And I get to just experiment with the gear, with the drums, which when you think about when you go to a studio as a drummer and you have a day to record something, you don't really have that much time to experiment. Right. You have to go and deliver.
You almost have no time to experiment.
Exactly. So one thing that this has allowed me is, okay, what happens if I put, a pan on top of my drum? What happens? And then if I move the mic over here.
I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. So I have the luxury of being able to do all that stuff here. And if I don't like how something sounded or how I played something, I can repeat it as many times as I want because I don't have the constraints of time or money over here, it has really kind of changed my perspective on how to record. Now, when I go to record in a studio and we only have a day to record, it's incredibly stressful for me now. Of course, it has its different energy to do something like that.
Yeah.
To know that you have to deliver in that 1 or 2 takes.
Yeah.
Versus being able to be here all day messing around. So, the first edition of Bad Hombre was just me improvising on the drums and then orchestrating everything. And now I already did 2 tracks where I asked two singers. One is a fantastic singer from Mexico. Her name is Silvana Estrada, and she gave me a beautiful track of hers with just her, a click, and cuatro, which is a little guitar with 4 strings. Cool. And she separated the cuatro and the voice. And I got that it was already beautiful, but I was like, okay, how can I mess with this? And it was just so beautiful, but very linear. It didn't have a lot of this going on. So that's what I wanted to do. I like a lot of drama in the music. So I try to find ways of really, leaving her basically how she gave me the track with just that. And then some other parts where I have I don't know how many tracks of drums and percussion and synths and stuff. And when I showed it to her, she was like, wow, I had no idea my tune could do that. So it's been a really, really fun process. So I'm working with different singers to try to get more material and have that be kind of the concept of the next album.
When do you think that'll be out?
That'll be out in September. Next year.
I was going to say
2020. Yeah, September 2020. Yeah, it's still in the beginning stages, and I'm really excited because this is going to be the first record I do with Warner Music, which for me is a big deal because it's a major label, and that's going to be big in my career.
And where will you do? So if when you're doing other overdubs, you're getting tracks with singers. How do you do that? Will you record them here in your studio?
Oh, no. That's the cool thing, that they send me the tracks separately.
Awesome.
Like she sent me a track from Mexico.
Yep.
And I just download the track and then I go wild with it. So it's kind of a collaboration, but it's a blind collaboration.
Yeah.
Because they have absolutely no idea what I'm doing with the tracks. So obviously I work very hard to do them justice and leave the track basically intact, but just add different flavors to it. And what I think is innovative about this project is that usually whenever you have a vocal record, the next instrument in terms of hierarchy is not the drums.
Right.
Right. So this time around, I want people to be like, okay, vocals is the most important part, but drums are right there. So I'm hoping people are going to dig it. I'm having a ball making it. And another thing that I've been doing this year, which has been a lot of fun, is touring the material from the album that came out in January with my band Migration, which is called Lines in the Sand. And this is a really
record.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been a very interesting thing to record the music, to compose it, and then start playing it live and see what the tunes can do. Because we went into the studio without ever playing it live, so then we're very focused on really making the best out of the recording. But once you start playing it live, all of a sudden it takes a life of its own. And I think with this band Migration, which we've been playing together since 2011 now, I think it's kind of like my flagship band. That's where I've done the most projects, and it's really where I can kind of do the most adventurous writing. The first tune is 25 minutes long. The last tune is like 27 minutes long. And I love to write, what we were talking about before about storytelling.
Yeah.
I love to write long pieces because I feel like it's a different way when you can tell a story in 30 minutes instead of in 5.
Right.
So you can develop your characters, which in this case would be the melodies, the rhythmic motifs, the harmonies, in a more relaxed way. And because I studied classical music for so long, and I studied Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and these incredible classical composers, I learned a lot about how they structure long compositions. Where a symphony, which has 5 movements or something like that, of course, I approach it in a different way, but it's similar. Using the same ideas and start doing this, with different harmony, different rhythm, different tempo, different dynamics. And, it's just really cool to just be able to sit down and put into, paper anything that I can think of, and then have a band that can actually play it. And also have enough gigs to actually start researching what we can do with that music live. So that's been fun. So if you guys can check it out, Lines in the Sand, I'm thinking you're gonna like it. So,
well, Antonio, when the record's done, before it gets released, maybe we can have you on another episode. You can play a track, and you can talk about the album.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. This has really been fantastic.
My pleasure.
That's all for now. Please subscribe here to my Everything Music YouTube channel. If you're a first-time viewer, don't forget to ring the bell. If you're interested in the Beato book, go to my website at www.rickbeato.com. Beato book 3.0 is out now. Follow me on Instagram at rickbeato1. And if you want to support the channel even more, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club. Thanks for watching.